Hi, it's Andrew Paul Cronin. Thank you for listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. Over the past couple of years, I've talked to artists, a poet, a doctor, my two moms, an orchestra conductor, a ghost hunter, a race car driver, a professional dancer, and many, many more. If you like these stories, if you like the guests, if you like the questions, if you like the show, please consider supporting it. Go to qaapc.com/donate. Thanks.
But I was always sort of curious about Cronin. I thought he was some sort of wizard. I thought he was older than he was. I thought a lot of things, and then he comes, he's like, he's just this guy. But he does the full spectrum. He lives down the street. So here's Cronin.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you're listening to the Q&A with A.P.C., the show that features conversations with artists, cultural figures, policymakers, performers, and other innovators living in Virginia. Episode 33, Philip Odango. Philip Odango is an artist, designer, producer, director, and actor. He has directed and produced over 24 stage productions and is known for his award-winning costumes and his brand, Canvas Cosplay. Philip has received the most attention for his work as a cosplayer. Cosplay is a blending of the words costume and play, and is a hobby in which participants wear costumes and fashion accessories to represent a specific character, often from anime, cartoons, comic books, live-action films, television, and video games. His costumes have been featured in the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Forbes magazine. He was commissioned to produce a replica prop for the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and he is an official Singer Sewing Machines brand ambassador. His first book, Cosplay Marketing and PR 101, will be released this January. Philip, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Psychologists are trying to figure out how the clothes we wear can change us and by how much. A psychologist at Columbia Business School did a study where he asked participants to put on a white coat, and he told some of the participants that they were wearing a painter's smock and the others that they were in a doctor's coat. The people who thought they were in a doctor's coat were much more attentive and focused than the ones wearing the painter's smock. On a detail-oriented test, the doctor's coat wearers made 50% fewer errors, and that basically people who put on the doctor's coat began to feel more doctor-like. Do clothes have the power to transform us?
I believe that clothes, costumes, whatever we put on our skin, makeup, they have the power to transform how we see ourselves and how the world sees us. And the things that we willingly put on ourselves, it's influencing how we want the world to see us. And in many ways, it transforms us. So when we choose to wear a certain brand or even take a shower for the day, we're choosing how we want the world to perceive us. And, even the cologne and haircuts and things like that, we choose that experience of how we want the world to interact with us. Now with cosplay, it's very much the same way in that when we are putting on a costume or we're putting on clothes, we're able to observe how the world will interact with us in this way. Mm-hmm. So maybe tomorrow I'll wear red stripes, or maybe I'll try a different haircut, or maybe I'll try a different cologne. And we negotiate within ourselves, do I like how the world is interacting with me? Do I like how I'm interacting with the world? Do I like that experience? So yes, it transforms us. It forces us to negotiate our likes and dislikes.
On your Instagram page, there's many photographs of you with different jackets and bags and jeans and shoes, and you describe the brand and things like that. How has fashion impacted our culture and history?
I think for me, I've recently been posting my relationship with different brands as a plus size male. And I think this has been an interesting kind of like area within cosplay of who can wear what, who is allowed or permitted to wear what.
Right.
And so when we're looking at like the history of costuming and we're looking at the people who used to make clothes were men, back in the day were the tailors. They were the ones who created the costume, and then it shifted into, it is a women's domicile, so we're looking at, gender prescribed roles. So when we're looking at influence of cosplay on history, we're looking at, or on fashion, we're really looking at, what is acceptable and not acceptable. And I think we're seeing more and more people being comfortable with being able to look at themselves objectively and be able to say, oh, I can do this, or I can wear that. And so we're seeing more non-traditionally sized folks who are cosplaying out of the box.
In your opinion, what are the two most important fashion innovations in the past 200 years?
For me, the two most important fashion innovations in the past 200 years would have to be elastic, and it would have to be the zipper. I would say that the zipper has transformed what we're able to squeeze in, what we're able to attach, to fasten very quickly and effectively. Otherwise, you'd be sewn into it, or you would be buttoned into it.
Right. Or roped into it.
Or roped into it.
Right.
Very much so, like with corsets, you were laced into it.
That's right.
And now you can buy corsets with a zipper.
Right.
And it'd still have the boning, it'd still have like the structure of it, but now you can easily get in and out of it. And then I would say Spanx, like elasticine, like the spandex, like that elastic material has allowed us to transform our bodies in many, many ways. So you can see elastic in the form of garters, in the form of belts. You can see it in the form of like suits that people wear in Halloween. You can see elastic and Spanx that people use to contour, compress their bodies. It's really interesting because for women, it's called body contouring, and for men, it's called compression. And so, but it has transformed the way we approach fabric. So now you have like neoprene, or stretch material.
Sure, and in sports, they wick the sweat away.
They wick the sweat, yeah.
200 years from now, what will people still be wearing that we are wearing now? And I don't necessarily mean like a zipper or spandex. I mean like leather jackets or penny loafers or like studded belts. Like 200 years from now, what are people still going to be wearing?
Well, I think looking back 200 years, so we're looking back at the 1800s, I think people will still be wearing structured items like corsets. People will still be wearing body modification pieces like that. But the idea of creating structure to create an illusion, I think that's still going to be around 200 years from now. And I think maybe in 200 years we will find by then, and we will have found ways to recycle rubber, and we'll find ways to transform plastic into wearable art. And we're seeing that nowadays with folks being able to transform rubber into fabric or use plastic.
You're best known for and have received the most attention and acclaim for being a cosplayer and for cosplaying. For listeners who don't know, can you give or provide a definition for and describe cosplay?
Sure. Cosplay is a portmanteau of two words, costume and play. And the idea of cosplay really started in the 1920s, 40s, in the World's Fair and Sci-Fi Expo, where a woman decided to dress herself and her boyfriend up as spacemen at the time. So this was a time where people actually showed up to the sci-fi convention, like just wanting to learn about sci-fi, and here they are in their spaceman outfit, and that kind of became like the genesis of people wearing costumes to conventions, and it has really taken on kind of its own force all over the world. In Japan, which is kind of the origin of anime, really blended in with its contributions culturally to costume play, with all of its exports in manga and anime. And now, we see it there's at least 20 conventions going on every weekend all over the world.
Yeah, in the 80s in Japan, it really started sort of ramping it up worldwide, right? Like in terms of sort of really kind of spread. Philip, were the spaceman costumes, was it a fishbowl or was it more like a box? Do you know, in the 20s?
If I remember, and I might be misphrasing like the actual decade that it was in, but it was a sci-fi convention in its early days. It was very much a boxy, kind of just a boxy outfit, and it looked like it might have been like with maybe a superhero cape, attached to it.
We've all worn costumes, but can you describe the feeling you have when you put on a costume at an event, at a convention, at an expo? What feeling do you have?
There is a hush that kind of descends upon yourself, and that first eyeball that catches your eyeball when you arrive on the scene. And I remember that feeling in February of 2017 of this year, when I first debuted Maui from Disney's Moana. I was at Katsucon in Oxon Hill, Maryland, near DC. And when I descended that elevator, carrying my hook, got my tea leaf skirt, got everything on. And when that elevator door opened, there was a hush that happened where people just quieted, and I slowly walked out of the elevator, and they were just mouths agape of what they were seeing. And as as a cosplayer, you just never know like how people are gonna react. And when you get that sort of response where you've done something and it is effective and it just shuts people up in a very packed convention, that's when you know that you've done something, whether it's good or bad. You just know that you've created an impact. And for me, that was a very affirming moment, that it was like, wow, I actually, I hope this is okay. And there's that, will they like me? Will they laugh at me, or isn't that good enough? There's always those insecurities, I think that we have naturally of whatever we wear. Like, do they like my haircut? I think that's, that comes into play.
Did you know that one was special before you got out of the elevator?
I knew that it was going to be special. And I think I don't ever sugarcoat that, because there was a sense when I looked in the mirror and I saw Maui looking back, and I was like, this is going to change your life, Philip, for better or for worse.
What percentage of the power you receive from cosplay is tied to or a result of people's reactions to you? You talked about it a moment ago, but like, of the whole pie, what percentage of the pie is the reaction?
Of the entire experience, of the cosplay experience, I think that when you have an audience, that's your people. They're the ones who react to you, good or bad. What I've found is that when you start to cosplay for people, it becomes too manufactured. It becomes too expected. Like, you're always looking for the next big thing. I find that when you reclaim why you really get into cosplay, from, for real, and not just to become cos famous or become, just a celebrity on Instagram or what have you, and start to really look at, why you cosplay, you start to realize that the power that people give you through likes and views, it's all tied to the manufactured part of it. It's not real. It's not the reason why you get into it. And I think that's the challenge. It's a very philosophical approach when you start to get paid, to do things, when you start to get paid as a cosplayer.
What kind of emotional experience is it like taking the makeup and the clothing off at the end of the day, or once you get back to your hotel room or back home? What is that emotional experience like? Is it an emotional experience?
I've had some emotional experiences when you're deconstructing, namely because you've put a lot of effort into your creation of it. You're living that character. It is work to stay in character. Some people stay in character all day. As an actor, that's what I do. So when I translate that into cosplay, I stay in character, and it's very exhausting being another person, for however long period of a time. But when I take off, the pieces, and it's very much the same feeling I get when I'm directing, and it's the final show, and you're deconstructing the set, and you're putting things away. It's the very same feeling of melancholy of like, oh well, that was a great time, that was a nice roller coaster ride, and sometimes you never wear the costume again, and you just put it away into their little compartmentalized boxes, and you kind of move on to the next project or production.
Your two probably crowning achievements thus far in cosplay, Philip, is Maui from Disney's Moana, and the other one is Marvel's Doctor Strange. And Marvel found you and reached out to you. So how did that happen? What was that like?
Well, one of the kind of the almost like questions that cosplayers always have, about cosplay is like this whole idea of copyright infringement, right? Are we actually like infringing on characters and what have you?
Can we actually do this?
Can we actually do this? It's always a kind of gray area you never know about. So when I debuted Doctor Strange, which was my actually first machine sewn cosplay, and I debuted it at New York Comic Con, actually competed, and I placed second in my sewing division, which surprised me. Marvel found it and picked it up and featured it as an official cosplay for Doctor Strange. And so it was kind of really jarring. And I think I still have a screenshot somewhere of on the Marvel website where I had a picture of Benedict Cumberbatch, and there's a picture of me on a Marvel site. So I saved that one for posterity. But the idea being that, I started from really just hand sewing and wanted to create a character, and being able to be featured by Marvel, it had opened up this whole sense of like, well, if a guy from Norfolk, Virginia can figure out how to sew in a sewing machine and compete and win in a costume contest like that and be featured by Marvel, then what can't I do? Right?
And Disney Animation also labeled you as the Maui.
Yes. So I actually had the privilege of going out to D23 Expo in Anaheim this year, and I got to meet the directors of Disney's Moana. I met Oli Carvalho, the actress who voiced Moana.
Incredible.
I met the Andrew Milstein, who's the president of Disney Studios Animation, and being able to meet the animators was such a huge privilege and honor. And I was a guest also at HawaiiCon this year, and I had met Tamura Morrison, who voiced Chief Tui in the movie. And we were at the luau, and he came up to me. And of course, I'm just standing in a corner, like just, staring oddly, like, oh my gosh, I'm just fangirling here. And he comes up to me in his very deep voice. He says, "You honor our ancestor." And you could have just struck me down right there, because that was, such a huge honor and a huge compliment to be able to embody that. So that was, for me, for Maui to be able to take me from the coast of Maryland all the way, through the Philippines and to Hawaii was very much a homecoming, of being able to bring Maui home to Hawaii. And that's where I retired him.
You're a Singer Sewing Machines brand ambassador and a Velcro brand ambassador. And as someone who grew up in the 1980s, it is incredible and fascinating to me that someone can be sponsored by Velcro and Singer Sewing Machines, which is such an iconic American company. How did those two partnerships come about?
With Singer Sewing Company, Singer's been around for over 100 years, known worldwide, and I remember my relatives in the Philippines having the industrial Singer machines with the 3-inch long needles, and I always kind of grew up around the brand. When I bought my first sewing machine, which was a Singer heavy duty machine, it was on Amazon, and so they delivered it to my door, and that's what actually sewed my Doctor Strange costume on. And I Googled and YouTubed how to sew because I had no idea how to sew with it. I had this kind of irrational fear of sewing through my fingers because I had these like giant fat man fingers. So I was like, oh, I don't want to like sew it. So I literally learned how to, literally and figuratively, learned how to sew through YouTube and Google, and learned how to use the machine and made my Doctor Strange costume that ended up winning at New York Comic Con. And so on Instagram, I had tagged a singer on my, like, this is what I created, because they were always interested in seeing what people create, with it. And after a few months, I got an email from the fine folks over at the marketing department at Singer, and they were very much interested in what I was creating because I had already gone beyond Doctor Strange and started creating other costumes as well. And so they were very much interested in the fact that I was a man sewing and also in cosplay. So kind of two demographics that, for a 100-year-old brand are very much, interested in diversifying.
21st century.
Very 21st century. And which is what I've enjoyed being a brand ambassador for Singer, is that I've been able to kind of extend my love of sewing to other guys. So I started a Bros Who Sew hashtag and also Instagram account, and started teaching men how to sew as well.
It's a fantastic idea. Philip, do you remember the first character or movie or TV show that meant something to you growing up, something that really stuck with you?
For me, growing up, the first TV show that really resonated with me was actually the Japanese version, which is the actual origins of the Power Rangers, the Diary Rangers. And in the Philippines, where I was born, I remember seeing these characters dressed up in these spandex outfits battling, mechas and giant monsters. And for me, that kind of sparked an imagination of like, wow, this is a fantastical, cool thing on television that's just really amazing.
Was it the same Power Rangers that aired here in the U.S.?
In the U.S., they actually took bits and pieces from the original Japanese Power Rangers, the Super Sentai, and they spiced it with American footage that was filmed here.
Really? And dubbed it,
overdubbed it.
Yeah. In 2010, you performed in an off-Broadway revival of the play Hair in New York City. You've produced and directed more than 24 stage performances, and you've been the executive director of a regional theater company. Are there things that directing, stage design, costume design, lighting, and acting all have in common with each other?
Yes. I think there is an intrinsic desire to be able to manifest something inside that connects with other people. And I think that's what really art is about. I think there is a want and a desire to be able to connect on a very basic, very vulnerable aspect of the human psyche and the human heart. And whether you're doing sound design to evoke, provoke, invoke, you want to be able to create a mood, a mindscape, a heartscape, with the music and the tones that you're producing. Same thing too with literature and performing as an actor. You want to demonstrate the truth that is inside of you. And for every actor, even if they're reading the same script, their truth is going to be different every single night. And the interactions, when it's raw and it's real in front of a live audience, that will change dynamically every single night. And you're accessing a truth that is present, it is now, and it goes away when the performance ends.
Philip, at what age did you start calling yourself an artist?
I would say that I first started calling myself an artist probably in my mid-20s. I think before my mid-20s, I didn't really feel that I had a capital A artist like credential. I know I did stuff.
Yeah.
I made things.
Right.
But to actually be able to create art that is seen by other people, I think that's where theater really stepped in and actually gave me an appreciation of being able to own the phrase artist, that as an artist, I'm actually able to craft and create evocative experiences.
I've asked a lot of people that are sitting in that chair that you're sitting in, that same question, and everyone has different answers, but sort of the same thing. Some people have called themselves an artist very quickly on. Some people still are very shy to call themselves an artist. Some people don't feel like they are an artist until someone that they respect bestows them with that title, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's again, it's like one of those like words like talented, like it's loaded. I think we're able to really embrace artistry with a capital A much more succinctly now because we're able to share much more immediately.
You've said cosplay is a journey of creative self-expression that allows you to transform yourself into inspirational heroes. What has that journey been like, and can you describe your journey?
Yes. So people think that it is just the final product, that it is just what you're wearing. And I think that if we look at cosplay as a capstone, which is how I approach it, that it is actually months of work leading up to that portfolio review. And when a person actually finishes their costume and debuts it to the world and takes some really nice pictures with it, it is a presentation of their thesis. It's a presentation of their months-long journey into creating that, into studying its shape, its form, its texture, its function. And I think that is part of cosplay that many people don't get to see as much, is the actual journey of learning a new technique or working with materials that are foreign to them, or trying or understanding a character. So when I'm working with, a character like Doctor Strange, huge fan of like the, comic series, but also being able to better understand like the materials and the fabrics and the construction, and going to great lengths into research in order to be able to create something like that. For me, that is the transformative journey of self.
How long does a costume take to complete? Now, obviously, it certainly depends on the character, but basically, like, what's the time frame?
Well, if we don't count the number of hours walking around a fabric store, like touching everything.
You've gained all the materials at this point.
At this point. So now we're actually ready to go, ready to sew, ready to build and craft.
Right.
Depending on the complexity of your character's build, very much like a game build on in a game. Mm-hmm. You're looking at, you're estimating for armor, you're estimating for props, you're estimating for sewn pieces, you're estimating for any special effects or prosthetics or wigs, kind of crafting and all that. It can take anywhere from a 2-week build. My Bays Malibus was a 2-week build in between conventions. Even though that actually had so many parts to it, that I had 2 weeks of nothing else to do but build that costume. And it can be upwards of 5 months. My Doctor Strange costume took about 5 months to make, because it was almost all sewn.
There were stories that I found. I didn't actually find the stories, but I found hints at stories about your experiences dumpster diving or harvesting, as you called it. Can you run through one or two of those?
Sure. Like I've done several panels on cosplay on a budget. So there are ways of being cost effective when you're creating your cosplay builds. And one way that I found is being a person who took assemblage in college, was being able to upcycle or recycle materials. And I call it like foraging or harvesting. So in my truck, I keep kind of like a toolkit of like a dust mask, some gloves, box cutter, and a garbage bag.
Not suspicious at all, Philip.
Totally not suspicious at all. And depending on the neighborhood, usually in affluent neighborhoods, I would see some very, very nice furniture like out on the side of the curb, or I would like peruse Craigslist and see what's free,
right?
Or like the Hampton Roads, listings,
yeah,
and what people put out on the curb. And it is amazing how much stuff people throw away. What I do is on trash day or the day before trash day, when it's all out on the curb, I go out there and start foraging, and then I actually cut out like panels and panels and panels of faux leather, of vinyl, real leather, like pieces that I actually use in my costumes.
Are there things that you do to prepare yourself mentally or do to put yourself in the mindset to inhabit a character?
Well, I first pick characters that I feel a natural connection to. And when I go into a nurturing space of being able to understand what the character, desires the most and, wants to accomplish, I find that truth within myself. And I think that's where, who doesn't feel disenfranchised or who doesn't feel, left out or marginalized, or they want something so much they'll do whatever it takes. I think those are all universal archetypes that we find within ourselves. And as artists, we use the medium of the craft to be able to bring that out, to manifest that.
And you want to understand their story, the character story that the writer and the director of the TV show or the movie or the comic book has, or do you want to understand yourself through that character when you don the costume?
I think it's self-reflective too. I think, that's where, like a story like Doctor Strange, he is a playboy billionaire who living his best life as a surgeon, and to one day be able to, lose his ability to perform surgery, and he's now forced to change people's lives in a very different way. I think we can relate to that in our own way of that. We may get what we want, but not necessarily in the way that we want it.
Do the costumes you choose bring out something in you that's not usually visible?
The costumes that I pick, the characters that I pick, they all embody strengths within myself that might not necessarily be present all the time, like observationally. And I think that is the fun of cosplay, is that you're able to find the truth within yourself and be able to express those. So that is the creative self-expression. So there are areas, of being a hero that I might not necessarily feel every day as me, Philip.
Yeah.
But there are, some fantastical journeys and narratives that I would love to experience, and cosplay affords you a way to do that.
Can you isolate something specific that you found about yourself that you didn't really know was inside you that you found through cosplay?
I found through cosplay that I have an ability to look at myself objectively and not see myself. And I think that is it's a very interesting ability to do that, because when you're an actor, you're very much so self-concerned about, like, am I doing this right, or how many takes do I get, and how can I improve it, because every night it changes, or if you're doing on film, it's kind of like, well, that's the take,
Sure.
right? But as a cosplayer, you get to embody that, within yourself every single time. Like, you can change it, you can modify it, you can add to it. And what I've learned about myself through cosplay that I haven't found anywhere else, it really is the ability to look at myself in a finished product and be able to say, wow, I created that, and wow, like, I really transformed in that. And so, which is a very fun way of being able to, in many ways, be able to be self-appreciative. It's not necessarily the narcissistic aspect of it. I think it's more of like, wow, I was able to achieve what I wanted visually onto this photo.
Your first book, Cosplay Marketing and PR 101, is available now as a digital download, with hard copies going on sale in January 2018. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration to write the book, getting published, submitting it to all the different channels, and how that all works?
We live very much in a creator economy now. So anyone with access to the internet can easily become a shareable source, but not everyone can be an expert source, though. What I've experienced in cosplay is a lot of questions about how to promote myself or how to get my brand started. And I was fortunate enough to be able to present a draft of this presentation at Rose City Comic Con in Portland this year. Did a whole panel on it, and it was a very packed audience. And I had presented just the very basics of, what is a brand and how to build it, and understanding what persona that you want to put out there, and understanding the mechanics of it. So it's very much, the whole science and art of marketing and PR. And when you lift that veil for people who have no idea that there is an actual science behind marketing and PR, they start to appreciate, oh wow, this is actually like beneficial. And the feedback I've gotten from folks is that this has been like the most beneficial professional development panel they've been to in cosplay. It's not just about, I'm going to get famous, but it's also like, what is the actual business plan aspect of it? Okay, what am I looking to do to network and be able to build your Rolodex of contacts? So it's a very much designed for the artist who are looking to really build an audience space.
Your book is available on your website, canvascosplay.com. Why Canvas?
That is a great question. Canvas Cosplay started off from being an artist. When I started owning the concept of being an artist, is that when we look at canvases, and I'm always inspired at canvas, like painted canvases at a thrift store, because when you go into like the rummage bin and you see these canvases, they've been painted over, like they've taken like someone else's canvas and painted over it. And when you really think about the externalization of our self, our creative self, and when we are bare naked and we start to decide, well, this is what I'm going to wear, this is how I'm going to smell like, this is how my hair is going to look like, this is going to be my eye color, and you start to externalize these features, about yourself, you're really just painting on your canvas. You're painting and painting and painting and painting all over it until you get that desired like Mona Lisa effect from people. Like, oh, this is art. You point at it and say, this is art. And people say, oh yeah, that's art with a capital A. So what I've found in cosplay, it's very much a similar effect. Like, this is cosplay. Like, you point at it and you tell someone, oh yeah, this is good, this is art. So when you start to strip away that canvas, you peel away the layers of costumes, of hours of work into it, of all of your money and time invested, into it, all of your media and PR and press and Instagram followers and all the stuff that goes around it. You start to peel away those layers and you're really left with that original blank canvas that you get to. And as you were saying before, that feeling of, how does it feel like when you're peeling away like the makeup, you're taking away the clothes, or when the set goes away, you're back down to that blank canvas. You're back down to the rudimentary of just skin and bone, of just stretched canvas on a wood frame. And that is the psychology aspect of it.
Philip Odango, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you've been listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. To hear archived episodes, visit theq&awithapc.com. For exclusive content, including upcoming shows, behind-the-scenes pictures, and more, follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at QAAPC. The executive producer of the Q&A with A.P.C. is Ben Riley. The music was arranged by Soup.